My name is Eva-Lena Carlén-Johansson. I work at Skanska, which is one of the world's largest construction companies and project developers. I work here as a manager for sustainability projects, and we have around 50,000 employees and somewhere 100,000 suppliers. Some of those we have framework agreements with, and we actively seek to work with them to reduce use of hazardous substances. We started a long time ago with our chemical management strategy. Already in 2000 we developed a restricted substance list for our global use, and then we have some business units which also drove the chemical policy because they had very strict demands in their local markets. So in 2009 we further extended that list. So today it includes 4 groups of heavy metals and 6 families of man-made chemicals. And that's a global list. But the local business unit list would then be further extended because they can apply other requirements in their local market. So that is the base really for our chemical management. Skanska is aspiring to be the leading green construction company and project developers. So then by doing that we also need to be actively involved in which materials we select and how we select it. And we try to find and actively seek for commercially viable alternatives to hazardous substances, because our finished products, the building or the infrastructure project, should have as limited environmental impact as possible on the environment, but also on the health of people. So if you live in an apartment which we have built, then it should be using very good materials with low emissions, and that is our task really. We understand that what is legal today may be illegal tomorrow and should not be used. And if you build something that will stand for a long time, then you need to consider that already today. As a construction company, we can do a lot, because what we construct today in this resource-intensive industry, where we use a lot of materials, the construction we make, the building or the infrastructure project, is something that will be there for decades. So stand today, but should also stand against the coming legislation. So by future-proofing our buildings today, we can then recognize what is beyond compliance and regulations. So we need to be progressive. Skanska is on a journey, which we call our journey to deep green. And that is for our green business in our different home markets. So we know that we can make a difference with the products we are making. We can build more green buildings and also more infrastructure projects that has less environmental impact. And we have outlined 4 different areas: energy, carbon, materials and water. And when it comes to materials, one of our aspirations is to have 0 hazardous materials. The desired destination with our journey to deep green is to have 0 or near 0 environmental impacts. We want to have 0 hazardous materials in our projects. One example would be hospitals, where people naturally care about the health and the environmental impact. One example is our biggest project ever, the new Karolinska Hospital in Solna. And the selection of materials on that project is much more driven than any other project we have. For example, they look always into finding alternatives that is workable and less hazardous. One example is something we have shared with the Subsport, a substitution portal, where we had a chemical anchor that was, you needed a very extensive training to use it, and you needed to have your personal health checks and the waste that came from the material that would also be very hazardous. Together with the supplier, which is Hilti in this case, they had developed a product that was much less hazardous, or not hazardous at all. So you didn't need extensive training, you didn't need the health checks, and you didn't need to treat the waste as hazardous. And still the substance as such worked as good as the previous substance. And those suppliers, that is actually what we want to work with, and those that can also make our journey to deep green complete. The SIN list is something we see as a very good database, because using that knowledge from other experts in the field, we can then learn more about hazardous substances. And that helps us when we want to be proactive in selection of different materials, because we can quite easily, through the database, actually seek information around different impacts from those substances. And we can then more actively seek for other viable alternatives. We don't use the substances that is on that list if we can find alternatives. That's truly the reason for using it. Skanska became a member of the ChemSec Business Group in 2004. We wanted to be a member very early because we see that there's an opportunity to getting knowledge from others that knows about chemicals. We want to be proactive, and by being that, we can use the knowledge we gain. We also want to speak with like-minded companies, because we will maybe build their new office, and that's a good reason for us to also understand where they put pressure. We see chemicals management. That is something you can do for one piece in your company, but you need also to involve others, because the trends will change over time, and better understanding of the trends, that is something we get from the business group as well. For Skanska as a company, it's important to actually have this question about hazardous materials on the table. And we need more input from science, we need more input from NGOs. So definitely we want legislators to be very proactive, but we understand that the process is slow, and then our piece of this could actually be to help drive progress by more progressively select materials that is less harmful. We can pass on our knowledge to other companies through working with our clients. Some of those are much more into having green projects than others, but we can always impact, and we can always give them some of our knowledge. Sometimes we are our own client, and then we can show this is possible. Possible to select a material that is less harmful, and also find services or green solutions which during their lifetime cause less environmental concerns. Then we share with the external market. We share sustainability case studies on our corporate website, skanska.com. There you can see examples of where we have more proactively worked on reducing hazardous materials.